And now it does. All right. I feel like a rock star. All right, so my name is Cris Ewing. I am the principal for Cris Ewing Developer LLC. Available for hire now. And I'm going to give you a talk today about ZopeSkel. This is a historical talk. It is a non-technical talk. There will be no code displayed during this presentation. If you're looking to look for code, you can come after lunch, where we will have the tutorial about how to use ZopeSkel and how to extend it and how to make your own templates and make your life just filled with joy and happiness. But I've been the release manager or the maintainer of ZopeSkel for about 3 years now, and it has come to my attention that there may be a large number of people who have no idea what I'm doing. And so I figured that it would be a good time for me to come to the Plone Conference, give a talk about what's going on with ZopeSkel, where it started, where it's going, and the reasoning for the changes that have been made. So during our talk today, we'll start out by going over the beginning, where ZopeSkel comes from. We'll talk about some of the early years and the development of ZopeSkel as it moved forward. We'll get into the sort of awkward adolescent phase of ZopeSkel, and then the big sort of breaking point, which was the no-fun ZopeSkel BBQ Sprint in North Carolina. After that, we'll talk about the transition to Templar and the confusion that surrounds that, and then we'll have a little bit of a chat about the future of ZopeSkel, where it's going from here. So, in the beginning, we had products. And in order to make a product, you had something called ArtsGen XML, which was quite wonderful because you could work with simple, easy-to-understand UML diagrams. One of the disadvantages of something like ArtsGen XML was that it was really oriented only towards content types. That was pretty much the only thing that you could do with it, which I think is one of the reasons why we ended up with such a sort of content type-centric approach to development during the early years of Archetypes and that particular product. Later on, we began to develop our way towards eggs. You need to be able to create egg products. You also need to be able to create things other than AT content types, and we needed to have some sort of a tool that was going to help us do all of this. So, on the 5th of, or actually the 25th of May in 2006, I reversed those for the European conference here, and it just confused me. The 5th of the 25th month. No, that doesn't work. So on May the 25th in 2006, a package was born. This is the date of the very first check-in of ZopeSkel to the collective. It was made by Daniel Nuri. Started this thing out, and at the time this was the ZopeSkel package. There was an Init Pie that had a basic Zope package and a basic namespace package, and a couple of template files, template directories that supported that. So that's basically all it provided. It had the basic package script, which came from PasteScript, which is the parent of ZopeSkel. And then it had a basic namespace package thing and a basic Zope package. Between then June and July, we developed a new Plone core package, which was sort of the beginning of a single namespace package that was aimed at Plone product development. That was created by Hanno. And then we added on a theme for Plone 2, a nested namespace package, and Plone app, which became the nested namespace for Plone type things like Plone app portlets or the like. In fact, I think the very first thing was well, actually, I don't know. Anyhow, then between January and March in 2007, we added in the Buildout for Plone 3. We added in a Plone 3 theme. We added in a Plone 2.5 theme. 1 year after it was born, ZopeSkel provided 9 templates. It had 7 different contributing authors, and version 1.0 was tagged in September of 2007. Later in 2007, somebody added a template for Archetypes. There was another template added for building recipes for ZC Buildout. There was a hosting Buildout template that was created by Wickert Ackerman that sort of manifested some of Yarn's best practices around creating hosting. And at the end of 2007, we had reached version 1.3, and then local commands happened. Starting in the very beginning of, or the very end of 2007, a branch that had been created by Mustafa got merged in. This allowed us to go ahead and enhance packages that had already been created. The initial offerings for this included something like the portlet local command, which allowed you to add the structures that supported a portlet into an existing either Plone or Archetypes package. Browser views, a meta directive one for ZCML. I don't know if anybody or how many people ever used that one. It was kind of nice. And then a content type, the ability to actually set up and create an Archetypes content type, thus forever allowing us to stop using ArtsGen XML. Shortly after that, there was another template added for, our local command added for iteratively creating an AT schema. So you could actually field by field designate the schema for your Archetypes content type, which was really quite nice. There was much rejoicing in the land when this happened, of course. But this is where we start to reach that kind of awkward adolescent phase. We have now reached the point where most of the templates that we have just have way too many questions. For example, the archetype. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 questions. And you had to walk through each and every one of them and answer all of them, or at least hit tab or enter to accept the default values for them. Also, the descriptions around these questions were somewhat cryptic. Things like Zope2 product, the help text for which said, "Are you creating a Zope2 product?" I use Plone. What is this Zope2 product of which you speak? I don't know. We also had too many templates. There's just this really amazing proliferation of templates. What have we got here? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 separate templates, many of which appear to be pretty similar to each other. And then additionally, we had these kind of multiples of things. For example, there's the Plone 3 portlet template, which was basically the portlet local command writ large, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Anyhow, so how do you choose from this bewildering array of delicious goodies? It was really just way too much code inside here. And especially, there was way too much code that was repeated. There were similar structures that were in each one of these templates, things that could have been abstracted away but were not. And so there was just a ton of stuff inside this thing, and it became really difficult to track the drift between one template and another. When things changed in one template, it was almost impossible for anyone trying to maintain this thing in a sane way to go through and make that same change to all the other templates that shared it. For example, right up until today, in fact, the Archetypes package in the original ZopeSkel has a nice tests directory, whereas the Plone package has tests.py, the test file. Completely different ways of setting these things up. And in fact, there was a point at which if you ran the templates, you got both, which doesn't work out very nicely for you. There were also dependency problems that come with ZopeSkel. For example, local commands need to be inside a package in order, they need to be in the working set so that Paster can understand that they are in fact something that has these little local command plugins available to them. What this means is that Paster has to actually install your new package when you create it in order to be able to know that that stuff is available to you. And so your package has to depend on PasteScript, which also then depends on paste deploy and paste, as a result of which you end up doing something like this. We have this little line, or these pair of lines, that give us the ability to have local commands, and we end up with that. Every time you create a template, you end up with paste, paste display, and PasteScript inside your egg. I cannot tell you the number of times I've accidentally committed those things into version control and then had to go back later and delete them, and I can't count the number of packages that I've seen where they never bothered to delete them from version control. And so you have these random, you know, and those are big packages. There's a lot of stuff in those packages. So this leaves us with one big question. Who exactly is ZopeSkel for? this is when we started to hit the no fun ZopeSkel BBQ Sprint. This happened back, I guess it's almost exactly 3 years ago now, in North Carolina. It was organized by the legendary Sprint organizer, Mr. Chris Calloway. And it involved 5 developers, Joel Burton, Chris Calloway, Josh Johnson, Chris Rossi, and myself. And what's that? Oh, Chris Rossi, do you guys know him? Oh, he's actually very active now in the pyramid community and works in there a lot. But he's also a local down in North Carolina and came along for the fun of it. The goal of this sprint was to try and make ZopeSkel easier and to answer that question of who ZopeSkel is for. I think our preliminary decision and really the final decision was that ZopeSkel is a tool to try and help newcomers. Right? Those of us who've been developing in Plone for a while have gotten kind of accustomed to needing to build packages, and we know where the things are that we need to create. And for many of us, it's just easier to start out with an empty egg structure and hack in the things that we need to have. But for newcomers, it's really quite a lot of help to get all of that extra boilerplate in place, along with maybe the comments and things that make it apparent what all of that stuff is for, and to help you learn what all of those little extra bits and pieces mean. So we had some goals for the sprint. The first one was to try and clean up the templates that existed there. The second one was to go ahead and try and improve some of those questions so we didn't get the Zope2 product, are you creating a Zope2 product question. And then the next thing was to try and wrap around the original command that everybody used, this paster create -t thing. The main reason behind this was that Joel was finding in most of his classes that the largest single mistake that was made by people was running paste create, forgetting the -t, and then providing the template name, which blows up in spectacular ways. So the outcomes of the sprint were that we managed to create this bin ZopeSkel script, the thing that wrapped around paste or create and massaged it for us. And it really helped us to hide paste create -t. It provided for us the ability to actually have inline validation of your answers. So when you provide an answer for one of the questions, there's actually a way for that question to judge whether or not the answer that you've given is appropriate. It also allows you to provide inline help. I don't know how many people know this, but if you type a question mark at the end of one of these questions, instead of providing an answer, it will give you further help about what's expected for those questions. So it also provides for the idea of classes of questions, meaning that we can group questions into levels, or what we called modes, that would allow you to choose how many of the questions you wanted to see. There's an easy mode, there's an expert mode, and there's an all mode. And if you select easy, you get a very, very cut down set of questions. These are basically the things that we can't really decide on a good, sane alternative that's going to apply, and so we really force you to answer those questions. If you get expert, you get a much larger set, and if you choose all, well, then you get all of them. Also, the nice thing about the ZopeSkel script is that it gives you good feedback when it's running and after it finishes running, and it provides hooks for people who create new templates to provide that feedback. So if there's additional information you want to give to your user, it will print it out at the end and provide it to you in a nice, clean, and easy to read fashion. Another outcome was that we got an official maintainer for ZopeSkel, and that was me. They called me up afterwards and said, hey, do you want to do this? And I stupidly said yes. And so there we are. One final outcome was that we came up with a plan to actually break up ZopeSkel and begin to chunk it into pieces. The philosophy, the idea, the sort of driving impetus behind this was this manifesto that Joel put together that is still in the GitHub repository for ZopeSkel now. You can actually go and read this and find out what we were thinking about when we made the choice to do this. But the basic idea was that ZopeSkel was too big as a single monolithic entity, and you had to download the whole thing. You couldn't just get little bits and pieces of it. If you didn't want local commands, well, too bad. You still have to have them. I'm sorry, that's just the way it goes. So this really didn't work out. So this was the plan then for us to go ahead and break this thing up. And there were a couple of sort of anti-outcomes from the sprint as well. The first one was that we failed at the end of the thing to really publicize what we had done as sufficiently as we might have. We also failed to write down in a more thoroughgoing fashion and make public the plan for what we were going to do going forward. And probably worst of all, we failed to go and clean up all of the documentation that existed out there on the website that still documented the old way to do things, paste or create minus t. So it's astonishing to me, even 3 years later after this thing has been created, how many people still use paste or create minus t. And they've never known what that bin zopescale command was for. Blame me. I'm sorry. I apologize for all of this. I stand here before you humbled by the experience, and if you want to throw things at me, I promise I'll duck slowly.
We're out of tomatoes.
Yes, we've run out of tomatoes, and please don't throw glasses. Anything else probably, though, would be okay. But we vowed to press on and to keep moving forward. And this is when we enter the Templar phase. We had this goal from the ZopeSkel sprint to try and break up that monolithic ZopeSkel. I started work on this relatively early in 2010. It took a while to mess around with ZopeSkel itself and try and fix some of the issues and begin to deal with that. But I began relatively early to try and break it up into pieces and make some sane decisions about what those pieces should be. The idea here is to sort of provide templates per package in a sense of related functionality. So we have a core package that provides sort of the base level templates and the core functionality of that script. We have a package that provides buildouts and the structures that surround buildouts. We have packages that provide Zope related things and ones that provide Plone related things and so on and so forth. The final goal of this whole breakup, though, was to try and keep it working the same for newcomers. Once again, we have all that existing documentation out there that says run bin zopescale. So we wanted to try and make sure that that people would be able to continue to do that going forward. So let's talk about breaking up. We have this Templar core package that we created. It provides for you vars, which are the actual class that provides these questions that you have to answer. We have base templates, just a namespace and a nested namespace one. There's a control script in there that is actually the thing that wraps paste create. And then we added this thing that we called structures. This was sort of the main difference between Templar and ZopeSkel, which is that ZopeSkel, if you provided a set of file system files and folders and such that were going to be rendered as a template, they had to be attached to something that the user could actually select when they ran, paste create minus t or bin zopescale. That's not always something that you want to do, and it really prevents you doing things like creating structure that's shared across a number of packages, because shared structures generally are not complete structures, and you don't want always to allow people to run a template that's going to create some kind of a half-created package. So we created this idea of structures, which are similar to templates, but they don't show up when you run paste list, and you can't actually run them individually. This allows us to create shared structures. It also allows us to do something that in ZopeSkel was implicitly possible, but in fact not possible. I don't know how many of you ever tried to answer the "what license would you like" question with something other than the GPL.
We write proprietary, but it just...
That's you? That was your issue? Okay, talk to me about that. Oh, somebody has asked me about that.
I never noticed a problem.
Well, you can answer whatever you want for the license. It won't give you anything other than the GPL. It writes the docs out all the time. This was the old one, which actually in some weird way is kind of appropriate for the GPL, but while philosophically correct, it was not actually the outcome that we wanted. And so structures allowed us to say, okay, which license would you like? And you answer the question, and it just pulls that correct license structure and drops it in for you. So now, with the new ZopeSkel, if you answer it with any of the approved licenses that are in there, and if you hit question mark for that question, you'll get that full list. You provide the name, you get that license. MIT, the Zope license, if you want any of these. They're all in there. Most of them are, in fact, all of them are OSI approved licenses, so they're all like open source type things. We don't have proprietary licenses in there, but somebody has actually opened an issue to make that a possibility. Well, okay, so what are structures? We talked about this already. They're basically templates that you don't run. So Templar core is then extended by something called Templar Buildout, which provides for the basic build-out structures. It provides for recipe templates, and then it provides a structure for bootstrap.py. It used to be that every time you wanted to upgrade the bootstrap that was provided in every one of the different templates that's in ZopeSkel. You had to replace it in every one of the different templates in ZopeSkel. Now you can replace it in one place, and it will apply across all of them, which is good. Buildout is extended by templar.zope, which provides for just a basic zope package and a nested zope package. And then that gets extended, finally, by the ones that we're probably most interested in, which is templar.plone. These provide the basic Plone package, a nested Plone package, an archetypes kind of thing. And then now, thanks to Timo from the Sprint the other week in North Carolina, we have a tile template, which allows you to write a basic tile structure. So you can begin creating tiles for deco and so on and so forth. It also provides structures for a generic setup profile, both basic and nested, so that you can answer the question, do you want a generic setup profile in your package? And it will create that thing for you. And we only have to define that structure once, which is nice. So what's back in there now? What actually exists in released Templar code today? Well, we have the Archetypes package, the basic namespace package, basic zope, nested namespace in Plone, Plone app reproduced as the nested Plone 1, and the recipe package, right? That's what we have. The ones that still have dots in front of them rather than little check marks do not exist. There's a fair number of them that I think should not exist and that we should just erase from our memories and let go. I've also just recently learned a way to make it so that we don't have to have basic namespace versus nested namespace. We can just have package. You provide the name. We give you the appropriate number of namespaces. So over the next month or so, that will most likely get hacked in. What about local commands? Well, Templar local commands are now possible. They're supported by a package at the top called Templar local commands, which provides sort of the infrastructure that makes them go. And then there's a package called Templar Plone local commands that's actually the in fact, commands themselves and the template structures that support them. If you want to install them, you can install templar.plone with the local commands extra, and you will get local commands. If you install Templar Plone without that extra, you do not get them. So if you like them, add them in. If you hate them, leave them alone. This is kind of a nice thing. It's, I think, probably one of the biggest improvements that has been made. It is optional. You don't have to do it. So now we begin on working on rebuilding ZopeSkel itself. It should just work like it used to just work. Basically, it's done by this. It's an empty egg. ZopeSkel is just an empty egg. All it has in it is a setup.py file that depends on all of these things. As you can see, the new ZopeSkel depends on Templar Plone local commands because ZopeSkel had local commands. The new one should also have them. So at the bottom, we have paste. In the middle, we have Templar, which provides extensions on top of paste. And then at the top, we have ZopeSkel, which is really just a Templar application. That's all it is. It's like a specific set of Templar packages wrapped up in one easily installable chunk. That's the difference between paste, Templar, and ZopeSkel. This is the biggest confusion for everyone out here, so I know there will be questions about this at the end, but this is it. ZopeSkel is a Templar application. It's a specific set of Templar packages that have been bundled together along with a particular command so that you can continue to use this tool as you have always used it, or at least as you should have been using it for the last 3 years. All you have to do is easy install ZopeSkel, or pip install ZopeSkel. Either one will work, especially now that pip, you have to make sure you have a recent enough version of pip. I believe it's 1.8 or so, where they properly support doing extras and chained extras. So if you have a recent enough version of pip, then pip install ZopeSkel will also work. These are the templates that are provided, and these are the local commands that you get. Browser view, browser layer, and portlet at the moment. And then within the Archetypes package, you have the AT content type local command and the AT schema field local command. So you can create a content type and then again, iteratively create the schema for that content type. So what's next? Well, we need templates. We need to fill out the picture a little bit more than it is right now. Dexterity templates are underway. There was a zopescale.dexterity package that is being translated to the new version, so it should be available relatively soon, perhaps by the end of the weekend. We don't know. It would be nice to have build-outs. There are plans underway. I've been talking extensively with Steve McMahon to try and unify our approach to building out things so that we may actually make it so that the unified installers are built by Templar in the beginning, so that when you go to create a build-out using Templar, you get something that looks almost exactly like the unified installer, that has similar structures, that has similar build-out files, so that you can actually have something that looks like what everybody's using when they just download the unified installer. The chief advantage of this is that for those of us who are offering help on IRC, it will be a little bit easier for us to find out where that person who's asking the question would be able to find the file that we're asking them to look for. No more, do you have buildout.cfg? Well, no. Do you have base.cfg? Well, no. So we can hopefully try and work our way towards a place where those questions are no longer necessary. It would be nice to have some additional local commands. We used to have a viewlet local command that would let us set one of those up. It would be nice to have one that allows you to create a utility quickly that provides the class structure and maybe the ZCML registration for such a thing. It would be nice to have one that allows you to build a Z3C form by iteratively building the schema for one. It would be nice to have a dexterity schema builder that allowed you to iteratively build the same kind of thing. They could clearly share the same structure because it's just Zope interfaces underneath. This is a shameless plug right now for the talk that's coming after lunch, during which we will talk about how to do these things. And then furthermore, a shameless plug for a sprint to happen this weekend where we will, in fact, do these things. So if you would like to participate in this process, if you feel like you have a role to play, please show up after lunch where I will teach you how, and then come over the weekend and we can actually make some of this stuff happen. What happens beyond this, though? Well, last year at the sprints in San Francisco, we worked on a package called Crushinator, the name of which is entertaining, but perhaps not much enlightening. The idea behind Crushinator is that despite the fact that Templar is much lighter and easier to use now than it was when it was ZopeSkel, and it's much easier to maintain, it is still kind of a pain in the neck because underneath Paster is still there. We still have to depend on Paster. We would like to be able to pull that out. We would like to be able to make it so that you can change the templating system that you're using. If you hate Cheetah templates, you could use Jinja, or you could use Python strings, or you could use almost anything. We'd like to be able to get rid of the sort of baggage that comes with Paste that assumes that everything you create is always an egg, even if it's a build-out or something else. It would also be very nice to have it so that the questions that are asked and the structures that are provided are completely independent of each other. So we can have a much more modular and sort of build as you want approach to putting together the structures for the file system and getting the questions that provide information for them. So that's something that we'd like to push forward over the sprint as well. I know that Tom Lazar is interested in doing that. I think Doman perhaps had also expressed some interest in making that happen. Crushinator does have a manifesto. It does have documentation that shows how it is supposed to work. And it has a number of interface files which lay out the API for it. It has no code at the moment. And in a way, it provides us with the opportunity to approach this the same way that Plone.api was approached, right? Write the documentation first, talk clearly about what it's supposed to do, and then just write the code, which is easy, right, to make it actually happen. So I'm going to open it up here for questions. I don't know exactly how long is left before the lunch hour, and I don't want to keep you from that for long, but I'd like to answer any questions you have, and if you have comments for me afterwards, I have my email, my IRC nick, and my Twitter handle up here, and I welcome any and all questions, especially if it means that you're interested enough to chip in. So, anybody, anything?
Why was it just considered for new users doing things and not also as an efficiency tool?
I think it's not considered to be just for new users, but the idea is to try and make it so that the primary audience is new users, but that if you want to use it as an expert, it provides all the things that you need as an expert. Did you have a question, Mika?
Not really, but
Oh.
just commenting that advanced users were smart enough to avoid ZopeSkel when it blows up on your face.
Yeah.
So we can fix that so it doesn't blow up your face and we can use it.
Yeah. Thank you, Paster. It would be very nice to get to the point where it was just, it would automatically install and you wouldn't have to worry about the potential for disaster. Anybody with really clever ideas on how to make that happen, I'd be welcome I'd welcome those contributions. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you need to easy install it, or can you just put it in your development build out?
You can put it in a development build-out, yes, absolutely. Yeah, you can run it in Buildout. All you need in Buildout is a part that says ZopeSkel and uses the eggs paste and ZopeSkel. Anything else is extra and probably will cause you problems. More questions? Yes, Rocher.
What's the ZopeSkel dexterity package with you?
What's that?
The ZopeSkel dexterity recipe, where does that fit in? Because I presume that has some dexterity content templates already.
Yes, it does. They are currently, the ZopeSkel dexterity package was written for the earlier version of ZopeSkel, which means that it's now got a bunch of incorrect import statements in it. But in order to translate it to the new ZopeSkel, it's largely just translate those imports, make the imports work, and the rest of it will come along. That process is actually underway. There is now a Templar.dexterity, I think, in the collective, and Steve McMahon has started work on that. I think Timo was also interested in working on that. So that is moving forward, and it should be done soon. At which point we'll just lock it into ZopeSkel as well, so that if you use ZopeSkel in your build out or easy install it or pip install it or something, you end up with the right thing. Yes, Kimchi.
If ZopeSkel is a Templar application, why isn't ZopeSkel in the Templar package namespace?
So that we can just do ZopeSkel, right? It is completely confusing, and I don't know. Maybe I'm a bad guy to put in charge of something like this because I'm a really crappy namer of things. I'm terrible at coming up with names. Templar is not my name. Crushinator is not my name. I would have named it, Bob's Nifty Templating System or something like that. But I would welcome input on how to best solve that problem. Right? We would like to have users be able to just have a ZopeSkel part, get a bin ZopeSkel command so that it lines up with documentation that's out there. Can you do that and have the egg be in the Templar namespace? Is there a way to think about that? I don't know. I'm at a loss to try and figure out an easy way to solve that problem. But I agree it's confusing, and I apologize for the confusion. This talk is mainly aimed at trying to help alleviate that confusion so you understand the layers that are going on here and what those layers are for. Any other questions? No? Hungry? Oh, yes.
I don't know, it might be rather fundamental, but is pasted the right thing to build on top of?
No. That's why we're trying to get rid of it. I mean, it's a really simple answer. I suspect that at the time it was the tool that was available and the most convenient thing. It did exactly what those first couple of packages did, right? The problem was that ZopeSkel grew organically into being something quite other than what it originally was. It got a lot more complex. It began to provide templates that supported things that weren't really pasterish. And that's when, it began to get ugly and problematic, right? As soon as you began to step outside of Paster's wheelhouse, Paster becomes a real issue for you. And so I think, while at the time it was probably the right choice to have begun there, how many times do you start a system using one thing, realize a year, 2 years, 3 years later that your system has outgrown that fundamental tool, and then you're faced with this question: how do you tear out the foundation of a house without knocking the whole house over? It's a kind of a challenging problem.
Yeah. It might be quite naive, but I was looking last night at something called Cog, which allows you to generate Python code within Python source files. So you've got distributed Python source file, but it's got a generator inside it for generating more
Cool.
Python. And I
That sounds really scary.
It sounds sort of Lispish, like your macro expand.
you can take that generator out when you run it through the app. So you can,
Right.
if you weren't going to use local commands, then
Uh-huh.
you could strip out all that generation. But that might be useful.
Okay. I'd be interested in it, at least reading the code and taking a look at it and seeing if it applies in some way. Thanks. Anybody else? Yeah.
You have ideas for replacing paster with is there something you are looking
No.
to that would be a good replacement already?
I think Crushinator, actually the spec for it and the design specs for it really make paster or anything else of that kind unnecessary. So it's basically completely dependency free with the exception of whatever you use to write out the templates and to execute those into files. And you know, we talked about this yesterday, and Martin said, "Well, you could just write your own template language and then be completely dependency free." I know. It's dangerous, though, when you start saying these things. No, I think that's a horrible idea, and I would not suggest it, and neither did Martin, just to be perfectly clear about that. I think it's fine to have a dependency on a template language, but we could make a better choice than Cheetah, really. Something that didn't require C to compile would be nice, probably. Anything else? No. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the attendance and your attention. I hope that I have not caused you too much pain in the last few years of your lives, and I apologize for that which I have caused. I would welcome any contributions to this, and anybody who has anything to contribute, open arms, right? In the standard Plone way. Whatever you've got to give, I will take without. So there you go. Thanks very much.